Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm just so thrilled you're joining us today.
Oh yeah, this is a great one.
Because today we are jumping straight into a tiny but incredibly high-stakes murder mystery.
High stakes for the fish, anyway.
Exactly. And the best part about this particular whodunit, this isn't your standard true crime thriller set in a smoky city or a locked room mansion.
Right, no detectives in trench coats here.
No. This entire saga takes place within a completely isolated, rigorously documented micro-ecosystem.
A backyard outdoor fish pond.
Yeah, an outdoor fish pond, which I just find so fascinating.
It really is a fascinating scenario to analyze. We're looking at a closed system.
Yeah.
And I mean, in any closed system, every single variable matters.
Literally every single one.
Yeah. One slight miscalculation, one tiny oversight in the initial setup, and it can just lead to absolute chaos for the inhabitants.
Absolute chaos. So to set the stage for you, our mission today revolves around a very specific, highly detailed source.
Published just today, actually.
Right. March 7th, 2026. It's a blog post, and honestly, the title alone serves as a massive spoiler for the tragedy we are about to explore.
It really gives it away.
It does. It's titled, Notes on Fishkeeping Part 205. Why You Should Never Mix Gouramis and Breeding Cichlids.
The sheer volume implied by that title, Part 205, that tells you immediately what kind of source we're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
We're dealing with someone who observes their environment with a microscopic level of dedication.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get to Part 205 of your personal notes without being incredibly methodical.
Methodical is the perfect word for it. And to truly understand how this mystery unfolds, we have to look closely at the author behind those notes.
You really do.
The writer goes by Ang, and he runs this massive online journal over at kianmm.org.
Which is a treasure trove, by the way.
It's unbelievable. He describes himself as an old software plumber.
I love that phrase.
Right. He spends his nights tinkering with free, Libre, and open source software, what people in the tech world call flares.
And that background, that is the exact lens through which we have to view this entire event.
How so?
Well, when you look at the source material, you see the digital footprint of a mind that is constantly organizing, categorizing, and troubleshooting.
Oh, totally. His archives are just mind-blowing. They go all the way back to 2011.
Continuing unbroken right up to today in 2026.
Yeah, the sidebar of his site is just this endless chronological tree of projects. He writes extensively about programming languages, things like Elixir, Erlang, Python.
Alongside AI, typesetting, meditation.
Dieting, home improvement. He literally documents everything.
It's worth noting, too, that languages like Elixir and Erlang, they are specifically designed to handle massive concurrent systems.
Right.
They're used to build applications where thousands of different processes have to run at the exact same time without the entire system crashing.
Which sounds exactly like trying to balance an ecosystem.
Exactly. So whether he's looking at complex lines of back-end code, the yield of a backyard garden, or the water chemistry of an outdoor aquarium.
He treats them all the same.
Yeah, as interconnected systems that need to be carefully maintained and occasionally debugged.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that debugging mindset is exactly how we enter the scene of our aquatic crime.
Let's walk through it.
So let's look at Ang's morning routine. He heads out to feed the fish in his outdoor ponds.
Right.
And he's expecting a very specific interaction. Typically, Gouramis, the fish in this particular pond, are surface dwellers.
Yeah, they're relatively peaceful, sometimes a bit shy, but they actually breathe surface air.
Right, so he fully expects to see them swimming right up at the top of the water, ready to gulp down their morning pellets.
What's fascinating here is how Ang processes the deviation from that routine.
The deviation being that the fish just aren't there.
Exactly. In software terms, a morning feeding is basically a routine health check. The system should be operating nominally, and the expected output is the fish appearing for food.
So when the Gouramis don't show up,
It immediately signals an anomaly.
a huge anomaly. Ang even goes about watering and tending to his nearby plants, deliberately giving the fish plenty of time to emerge from hiding.
Just in case they were spooked.
Right. But the surface remains completely empty. And this is where the grim discovery happens.
Oh, the crime scene.
Yeah. Ang decides to investigate the physical structure of the pond. It's an outdoor setup, and it features this upper plastic container where he keeps aquatic plants.
With the roots presumably extending down into the water below.
Exactly. So he lifts up that upper plastic container, and underneath it, he finds the bodies.
The last remaining Gouramis.
They didn't survive. It was a total loss of that specific population in the pond.
It's tragic. And if we look closely at his notes, we see this wasn't an isolated, sudden extinction event either.
No, it wasn't just a sudden overnight thing.
Right. He mentions a highly disturbing pattern leading up to this final morning.
The preceding days were just full of massive red flags. He noted that Gouramis were mysteriously perishing one by one over the course of the week.
And even more dramatically,
Oh, this is the craziest part. He observed some of them literally launching themselves out of the pond,
just jumping into the open air.
jumping out and landing on the ground, effectively choosing to dry out on the concrete rather than stay in the water.
Which tells us that the environment inside that pond had become so hostile, so fundamentally unlivable, that the biological instinct to stay in the water was completely overridden.
Overridden by the desperate need to escape whatever was hunting them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Aang doesn't just mourn the loss of the fish and move on,
No, he doesn't just write it off as bad luck.
or an unexplainable fluctuation in water quality. His software plumber instincts kick in immediately.
Time to debug the pond.
Right. He starts tracing the air back to the last major commit, the last change he made to the environment. He asks himself a critical question.
What happened when I introduced those Jewel Cichlids?
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the entire reason those Jewel Cichlids were moved into the Gourami pond in the first place, it was an act of mercy.
It was a rescue mission.
Yeah. Aang was trying to play the benevolent system administrator. He wasn't trying to create a gladiatorial arena.
We have to step back and look at the broader architecture of his backyard setup to understand this. Aang manages multiple ponds.
Right. It's not just the one.
In a separate, entirely different pond, he had a pair of zebra cichlids. And for those who might not know, cichlids are notoriously territorial,
Very aggressive.
especially when they're breeding. And these zebra cichlids had recently spawned.
They have babies.
Yes, and they were aggressively protecting their territory.
So the Jewel Cichlids, which are another type of cichlid, generally smaller but still incredibly feisty, were sharing that first pond.
And they were getting absolutely bullied.
Just constantly under attack by the hyperprotective zebra cichlid parents. So Aang sees this happening, realizes his Jewel Cichlids are highly stressed and in physical danger.
And he decides to relocate them to a new, theoretically safer pond.
The pond where the peaceful Gouramis lived.
He was trying to isolate a problem. In his mind, he was taking a vulnerable process that was crashing on one server and moving it to a secure, stable server.
Out of perfect logic, or so it seemed.
But he had a massive blind spot. He failed to run a complete audit of the new environment before making the transfer.
The ultimate blind spot. He admits right in the text that he completely forgot, or maybe just wasn't aware, that there was already another Jewel Cichlid living in that destination pond.
And not just any Jewel Cichlid. As he notes in his journal with a distinct sense of dark irony, it was a Jewel Cichlid of a different gender.
You can just see the dominoes falling in slow motion.
Yeah.
You take these relocated, highly stressed Jewel Cichlids, you drop them into a completely new pond to save their lives, and suddenly they meet a mate.
They bond.
And they do exactly what bonded cichlids do when they find a new territory.
They reproduce. And they don't just reproduce a little bit. Aang notes that this new pair created a massive spawn.
Massive.
He visually estimated the number of new fry to be somewhere between 100 and 200.
200 tiny new variables introduced into the system practically overnight.
It's wild.
It is so wild to picture that. One day it's a calm pond, the next day there's an entire army of fry swimming around, and suddenly the motive for the Gourami massacre becomes crystal clear.
The dynamic of the entire pond inverted completely.
The hunted became the hunters.
Exactly. The Jewel Cichlids were originally moved because they were the victims of territorial aggression. They were the ones fleeing for their lives.
But the moment they had their own 200 fry to protect,
They became the apex aggressors. They took on the exact same behavioral programming as the zebra cichlids they had just fled from.
Aang puts it perfectly in his post. He says this whole situation can only be described as jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire.
He thought he was saving them, but he just turned them into the very monsters they were trying to escape.
The aggressive Jewel Cichlid parents spent the entire following week relentlessly attacking the poor Gouramis just to secure the perimeter for their babies.
It is a stark, tragic example of biological imperative overriding a constructed environment.
Yeah.
Aang thought he controlled the parameters of the pond, but nature executed its own space-level code.
The prime directive.
The parents perceived every single moving entity in that enclosed space as a mortal threat to their offspring,
All 200 of them.
and they initiated a zero-tolerance defense protocol.
And there is a detail in Aang's write-up that makes this whole dynamic even more wild.
Oh, the size difference.
Yes. When you picture this massacre, you might be imagining these Jewel Cichlids as massive, hulking fish taking down the Gouramis.
Like sharks in a swimming pool.
Exactly. But Aang points out the absolute irony of their physical size. The lethal, highly aggressive Jewel Cichlids are actually physically smaller than the Gouramis they were systematically eliminating.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely shatters our standard assumptions about hierarchies in any competitive space.
We always think bigger is better.
We tend to assume that the biggest entity in a system is the most secure and the most dominant. But this proves that motivation and aggression, specifically when driven by a critical imperative like protecting a massive new generation, will completely override normal size-based hierarchies.
The Cichlids didn't care that they were smaller.
Not at all. Their biological drive essentially turned them into tactical missiles. They punched way above their weight class because their genetic survival depended on it.
The Gouramis just didn't stand a chance against that level of hyper-focused aggression.
No, they didn't.
But I have to bring up my favorite plot twist in this entire source, because despite the carnage, not everyone in that pond died.
Right, there were survivors.
The Gouramis were completely wiped out, yes. But Aang explicitly notes that there were Guppies in that exact same pond.
Tiny little guppy.
And they survived the entire ordeal without a scratch. How on earth does that happen?
It acts as the perfect control group for this unintentional experiment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You have a highly lethal environment where the larger Gouramis are being systematically eliminated, yet the much smaller Guppies navigate the exact same space without casualty.
So how did they do it?
Aang's documentation breaks down the survival of the Guppies into 3 distinct factors. First, we have to look at the behavioral geography of the pond.
Okay, where they physically spent their time.
Exactly. Aang observed that the Guppies strictly stay near the very surface of the water.
Which keeps them far out of the primary territory of the Cichlids.
Right. The Cichlids are likely patrolling the mid to lower levels where they've established their nest and where the fry are swimming.
So by restricting themselves exclusively to that top surface layer, the Guppies are minimizing their geographical overlap with the danger zone.
But geography alone isn't enough when you're trapped in a closed container. The second factor is the structural infrastructure they utilized.
Aang mentions that the Guppies were actively using the root system of a very specific aquatic plant as a shield.
He documents the scientific name of the plants for us too. Hydrocadial verticillata.
More commonly known as water pennywort.
Exactly.
And the roots of that water pennywort were dangling down from the upper plastic container.
Precisely. The water pennywort is acting as a natural firewall. Its dense, tangled root system provides a complex physical barrier.
So the Cichlids just couldn't get to them.
The aggressively patrolling Cichlids either can't physically navigate through those tight roots, or they simply don't want to waste the energy penetrating it when they have 200 fry to watch.
The Guppies recognized a structural advantage in their environment, and they utilized it perfectly to create a safe harbor.
And the third factor goes right back to that irony of size we just talked about.
Right. Aang realizes that because the Guppies are so incredibly small compared to the Gouramis, the Jewel Cichlids simply don't view them as a threat.
The Cichlids look at a guppy, and their threat assessment protocol basically says, "You are too tiny to eat my fry. You are not worth my energy to hunt down."
It is a brilliant example of asymmetrical threat assessment.
The Gouramis, purely by virtue of being larger fish, automatically triggered the Cichlids' defensive instincts.
They were perceived as predators.
Exactly. The Guppies, meanwhile, flew entirely under the radar. Their small size, which normally might be a massive disadvantage in the wild, became their ultimate camouflage in this specific high-tension scenario.
So what does this all mean? I mean, it is fascinating how closely Aang's backyard fish pond mirrors the kind of complex systems we navigate every single day.
It's universally applicable.
You think you are just isolating a small problem, but you are actually introducing a massive new variable into a fragile ecosystem.
The parallels are striking. Whether you are restructuring a corporate department, updating a piece of legacy software, or even managing a delicate interpersonal conflict within a community.
You are operating within a closed ecosystem.
And this deep dive serves as a masterclass in unintended consequences.
Think about Aang's initial action. He saw the Jewel Cichlids getting bullied by the zebra cichlids, and he implemented a quick fix.
He relocated them.
Right. How often do we do that in our own lives? We see a friction point, and we just move it.
We transfer a difficult employee to a new team, hoping a change of scenery fixes the attitude.
Or we patch a software bug by creating a workaround that shifts the processing load to a different server.
And that is exactly where the systemic danger lies. When you try to fix a problem in one localized area, you risk introducing a catastrophic variable into a completely new area if you haven't fully audited the destination environment.
Aang didn't know about the second Jewel Cichlids.
He didn't know he was providing the final missing ingredient needed for an absolute population explosion.
He thought he was solving a real estate problem for stressed fish, but he accidentally started a territorial war that wiped out a whole different species.
This raises an important question. How often do we implement our own quick fixes without doing a full environmental audit?
Oh, all the time.
We relocate a problem thinking we've solved it, only to create a completely unforeseen disaster because we fundamentally misunderstood the existing ecosystem we were dropping that problem into.
You simply cannot alter one piece of a closed system without sending ripples through everything else.
It's impossible.
It is such a powerful takeaway, and it really elevates a simple gardening blog into a study on systems engineering.
It really does.
To wrap up this incredible deep dive, let's just recap the journey our old software plumber took us on today. We started with the tragic, mysterious fate of the Gouramis,
Who were just looking for their morning pellets.
and ended up either jumping out of the pond in terror or perishing under a plastic plant container.
We saw how a well-intentioned intervention moving the Jewel Cichlids away from the aggressive zebras led to a prolific, unexpected spawning event of up to 200 fry overnight.
And we witnessed how that single biological event turned the smaller Jewel Cichlids into hyper-aggressive defenders that punched above their weight class and wiped out the larger Gouramis.
But perhaps most importantly, we saw the vital importance of documenting our failures.
Yeah. Aang didn't hide his mistake.
He sat down, wrote part 205 of his detailed notes, and shared his debugging process with the internet so that others could learn from his systemic oversight.
That level of transparency is the true mark of a seasoned professional.
Whether you are writing open source software or balancing the chemistry of a fish pond.
Exactly. And as we leave you today, I want to offer a final thought for you to mull over, building on what we've learned from this aquatic environment.
Consider the fascinating survival strategy of the guppies.
The ultimate survivors of the story.
In a highly aggressive, volatile environment, where the larger, seemingly more dominant entities are getting systematically taken down, sometimes the best strategy isn't to be the biggest, the loudest, or the strongest.
Sometimes survival is about finding your own water pennywort.
It's about finding a quiet, structurally secure niche where you can stay out of the fray, keep your head down near the surface, and simply be perceived as a non-threat, while the giants exhaust themselves fighting over territory.
So how can you find your own protective routes when navigating your own high-stakes environments?
What a brilliant way to look at it.
Find your water pennywort, stay out of the frying pan, and definitely avoid the fire. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the archives of an old software plumber.
It's been a great discussion.
We hope you walk away with a fresh perspective on the ecosystems you manage every day. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and take care.